Body Knows, Episode 11, When the Past Won't Stay Past. Welcome back to The Body Knows. We've just closed the first arc, Foundations of Behavior, where we explored how the nervous system speaks truth in the present moment, through fight, flight, freeze, fawn, through cracks in the script, through the terrifying and liberating moment of leaving. But now we step into a deeper layer, the past that lives inside the present. This second arc, Trauma, Memory and the Body, asks a different question. Not just what is happening to me now, but why does my body respond this way, here today, even when the context seems safe? Because for so many of us, the body is a time machine. It carries the imprints of what we've lived through. It remembers, even when the conscious mind forgets. It holds patterns, loop flashbacks that repeat, as if the past refuses to stay past. Trauma isn't just an event that happened once. Trauma is an experience the body couldn't fully process, that now replays in moments that feel eerily familiar. Think of it this way. When you walk into a room, your nervous system doesn't just see the chairs, the faces, the light. It scans for echoes, a tone of voice that reminds you of a teacher, a glance that feels like a parent's disapproval, a crowd that resembles a time when you felt humiliated or unsafe. The present is never just the present. It's layered with memory. In this episode, When the Past Won't Stay Past, we'll open the arc by exploring why trauma embeds itself in the body as somatic memory, how the amygdala and limbic system hijack the present with the intensity of the past, what happens in a panic attack when the body floods with fear seemingly out of nowhere, and how childhood conditioning, from attachment wounds to sensory overwhelm in autism and neurodivergence, sets the stage for how we carry the past into the now. I'll share scenarios like the sudden panic of standing in group worship when the body relives the shame of childhood discipline. I'll reflect on my own lived experiences of meltdowns, suppression, and the confusion of carrying sensations I couldn't explain. And I'll tie this into the broader question. If the body remembers, how do we learn to live with it without being trapped by it? Because the body is not broken, it is speaking. And sometimes what it's saying is not about today, but about yesterday. This arc is about learning to hear that difference, to distinguish between danger and memory, to recognize when your nervous system is reliving, not living, and to begin the slow work of untangling the loops that keep the past alive in the present. Let's begin why the body remembers, the physiology of somatic memory. When people say the body keeps the score, it isn't just a metaphor, it's biology. The body literally remembers. And to understand why the past refuses to stay past, we need to look closely at how the nervous system processes, or fails to process, overwhelming experiences. Step 1, the amygdala, alarm without calendar. The amygdala, buried deep in the limbic system, is like a smoke alarm. Its job is to detect threats fast, faster than conscious thought, faster than logic. But here's the key, the amygdala doesn't know time. It doesn't distinguish between then and now. When something resembles a past danger, a sound, a look, a phrase, it fires as if the danger is happening again. This is why a panic attack can feel like it comes out of nowhere. The body remembers. The amygdala has spotted an echo. Step 2, the hippocampus, context lost. The hippocampus, right next to the amygdala, is supposed to place memories in time. It gives them a beginning, middle, and end. It says, this happened back then, and it's over now. But under trauma, cortisol floods the system and disrupts hippocampal functioning. The memory never gets properly filed. Instead of being a story with an ending, it becomes an open loop. That's why traumatic memories return as flashbacks, not as that happened, but as this is happening. Step 3, the nervous system's time machine. The autonomic nervous system, sympathetic fight-flight and parasympathetic freeze-shutdown, responds to the amygdala's alarm as if it were real, here now. Heart rate spikes, breath shortens, muscles tense or collapse, digestion halts. The body prepares for danger, even when none exists in the present moment. This is why trauma isn't just psychological. It's embodied. The nervous system becomes a time machine, transporting you back to the felt sense of the original event. Step 4, implicit versus explicit memory. Explicit memory is what we recall consciously, stories, images, timelines. Implicit memory is stored in the body, sensations, emotions, and movements. Trauma lives primarily in implicit memory. That's why someone might not remember details of abuse, but still flinch at a tone of voice, freeze when cornered, or feel dread in seemingly safe spaces. The body remembers what the mind has lost access to. Step 5, polyvagal theory. Neuroception of past and present. Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory adds another layer. The vagus nerve scans constantly for cues of safety or threat. But when trauma rewires neuroception, the body interprets neutral or even safe cues as danger. This is why someone may feel unsafe in loving relationships, or why crowds trigger panic even without hostility. The body has been trained by experience to err on the side of danger. Step 6, neurochemistry of loops. Trauma doesn't just alter structures, it alters chemistry. Cortisol becomes chronically elevated, keeping the body in hypervigilance. Dopamine drops in regulation, making safe experiences feel flat. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, gets tangled with abuse, making danger feel like love. These imbalances create trauma loops, cycles where the body is constantly pulled back into familiar survival states. Step 7. Philosophical context philosophers have long known what neuroscience is only now explaining. Nietzsche wrote that the past flows into the present and we carry it with us. Kierkegaard described anxiety as the echo of possibility and memory. Buddhist thought frames trauma as samskara, impressions etched into the body-mind that shape perception long after the event. Whether ancient or modern, the insight is the same. We are never just here. We are always here, and then, unless we learn to distinguish the signals. Personal echoes, this isn't abstract for me. I've lived it. As a child, I carried meltdowns that felt bigger than the moment. The anger and collapse weren't only about the here and now. They were echoes of accumulated suppression, years of invalidation boiling over. As an adult, I felt it in relationships. A raised voice, a dismissive glance, my body reacting with panic that seemed too big for the situation. But it wasn't too big. It was the past showing up, unprocessed, unresolved. Every panic, every shutdown, every urge to flee wasn't irrational. It was memory without words, alive in my nervous system. Why this matters? If you don't understand why the body remembers, you'll think you're broken. You'll think you're overreacting. You'll think your body betrays you. But when you see the physiology, the amygdala without time, the hippocampus failing to file, the nervous system replaying, you realize this isn't weakness. This is survival. The body remembers because it's trying to protect you. The problem is that it can't always tell the difference between past and present. And that is where our work begins. Panic attack in group worship. Let's step into a lived moment. You walk into a hall filled with music, people swaying, hands raised. The atmosphere is charged, collective, expectant. To anyone looking on, it's a scene of worship, joy, and belonging. But for you, something else is happening. The first signals, at first it's subtle. A tightening in the chest. The air feels thicker, harder to pull in. Your shoulders tense without you deciding. The sound, singing, clapping, voices rising together, doesn't feel warm. It feels overwhelming. The acoustics echo, the bass thuds in your chest, and the fluorescent lights glare. Your mind says, I should be fine. This is just a gathering. But your body whispers, something is wrong. The body time collapse, then it happens. A phrase from the speaker, a rising tone of command, a sudden spotlight swinging across the room. And in that moment, time collapses. Your amygdala doesn't see a preacher's voice. It sees the echo of a parent's shout, a teacher's scolding, the shame of being singled out as a child. Your hippocampus can't anchor you in the present. Instead of this is happening now and I'm safe, it says nothing at all. The memory floods back as sensation, not story. And your nervous system takes over. The physiology of the panic heart rate spikes, pounding against the ribs. Breathing is short, shallow, and rapid. Hands tremble, palms sweat, vision narrows, tunnel-like. The gut clenches, nausea rises. You're no longer in the hall, you're in the past. The body is reliving a moment of discipline, humiliation, and shame. Even if your conscious mind insists, I'm safe here, your body screams otherwise. Freeze or flight? You try to sit still to mask it. Freeze response. The body locks down. Muscles stiffen. You avoid eye contact, hoping no one notices. But another part of you surges with the urge to run. Fight or flight pushes against freeze. Legs twitch. The thought flashes, if I don't leave, I'll suffocate. The contradiction is unbearable. Sit still or run. Collapse or escape. Your nervous system floods with both impulses. The social layer isn't just physical. It's social. Everyone else looks calm, engaged, even joyful. You glance around, and people are singing, crying, smiling. And you feel even more alien. The shame builds. What's wrong with me? Why can't I feel what they feel? Why am I panicking when they're worshipping? But this isn't about belief, it's about biology. The collective synchrony that soothes others overwhelms you, pulling you back into memories of being forced to comply, punished for resisting. The crowd doesn't feel safe, it feels like captivity. The spiral intensifies as the panic rises, you try to control it. You tell yourself, breathe, calm down, focus. But the more you try to suppress it, the worse it gets. Why? Because the nervous system doesn't respond to commands. It responds to cues, and every cue in the room, the volume, the lights, the authority figure, confirms danger. Your self-talk becomes another layer of shame. Why can't I stop this? The loop tightens. Panic feeds on panic. The exit point finally, the moment comes. You can't stay. The air feels unbreathable, your chest too tight. You stand, stumble toward the door, heart hammering. For a split second, terror peaks. They'll all notice. They'll judge me. I'll be cast out. But as soon as you step into the corridor, the body shifts. Air flows in, shoulders drop, vision widens. The nervous system exhales. Relief floods in, not because the danger was real, but because the body believed it was, and you finally acted on its signals. Analysis, the past alive in the present. This was not just a panic attack. It was the past refusing to stay past. The amygdala fired at echoes of childhood discipline. The hippocampus failed to anchor the memory as past. The nervous system replayed survival responses: freeze, flight, collapse. Social shame amplified the spiral, making isolation feel like a threat. From the outside, it looked irrational. From the inside, it was survival. Personal echo: I know this feeling. I've been there. For me, it wasn't always a worship hall, but classrooms, family gatherings, and relationships. Places where others seemed fine, but my body screamed. I remember the same spiral: shame layered on panic, the desperate wish to control what couldn't be controlled, the immense relief of finally stepping away. And I remember the aftermath, the days of recovery, the self-doubt, the wondering if I was broken, until I began to understand. My body wasn't betraying me. It was protecting me. The key point: a panic attack isn't madness. It's a memory. It isn't a weakness. It's survival. It isn't irrational. It's the body doing its job, only without timestamps. And that's why the past won't stay past. Because until it's processed, the body keeps carrying it, waiting for a chance to complete what was once impossible. Childhood conditioning and neurodivergence. If trauma is the past refusing to stay past, then childhood is where the groundwork is laid. Because it's in childhood that the nervous system is most malleable, most impressionable, most shaped by environment. And it's in childhood that the nervous system learns what is safe, what is dangerous, what is love, what is punishment, what is belonging, what is exile. The nervous system under construction. In early life, the brain and body are under rapid development. Neural connections are firing, pruning, and wiring at a speed that never returns in adulthood. This plasticity is both a gift and a vulnerability. It means children can learn and adapt incredibly quickly, but it also means adverse environments etch themselves deeply. When caregivers are consistent, safe, and attuned, the child's nervous system builds trust in the world. But when caregivers are unpredictable, dismissive, punitive, or frightening, the child's nervous system learns hypervigilance. Every raised voice becomes a potential threat. Every shift in tone is scanned for danger. This isn't a choice, it's survival. Attachment and conditioning attachment theory helps us here. Secure attachment. The child feels safe, soothed, and able to explore. Insecure attachment. The child learns that safety is conditional, love is inconsistent, and danger is unpredictable. Anxious attachment teaches the nervous system to cling, fearing abandonment. Avoidant attachment teaches the nervous system to shut down, fearing engulfment. Disorganized attachment teaches both at once: approach and avoid, love and fear. These aren't just psychological categories. They are embodied survival patterns. They shape how the amygdala reacts, how cortisol flows, and how the vagus nerve reads cues. Punishment and praise: school, religion, and culture layer on top of family. Behavior is coded as good or bad, not based on nervous system needs, but on compliance. The child who sits still is praised, even if they're in a freeze. The child who protests is punished, even if their body is overwhelmed. The child who masks their distress is rewarded, even as authenticity is eroded. This conditioning trains children to override their signals, to distrust their bodies, to seek external approval over internal truth. And when those children grow up, the past shows up as panic, collapse, people-pleasing, and burnout. The body remembers what society demanded long after childhood ends: neurodivergence, heightened sensitivity. Now add neurodivergence into the mix: autism, ADHD, sensory processing differences. These are not deficits, they are different wiring, different nervous system landscapes. Autism, sensory amplification: lights brighter, sounds louder, textures sharper. Filtering load: the thalamus and prefrontal cortex are overwhelmed by input. Amygdala reactivity is heightened, making neutral settings feel threatening under stress. Masking is common but costly: ADHD, dopamine regulation differences. Executive function is taxed, making transitions, attention, and inhibition harder. The nervous system seeks stimulation, but is overwhelmed by too much. Other neurodivergences. Each brings unique vulnerabilities and strengths, but all highlight how the nervous system responds differently to the environment. When neurodivergent children are forced into neurotypical molds, the result is trauma layered on difference. Meltdowns are punished as tantrums. Shutdowns read as defiance. Masking is rewarded as good behavior. Body pays the price. Personal echoes: I lived this. As a child, my meltdowns were visible: shouting, storming off, leaving the room. Adults saw only temper, defiance. They didn't see the nervous system stretched beyond capacity, the energy trapped until it had to burst out. Afterwards, I carried the exhaustion, the days of recovery, the shame of being too much. Double punished, first for the outburst, then for the misunderstanding. Other times I masked. I sat still, complied, kept quiet. Teachers praised me, parents approved. But inside I froze, my authenticity shut down. My nervous system collapsed into suppression, and the world called it good behavior. This conditioning shaped me. It told me safety meant silence, belonging meant collapse, and love meant suppression. And it took years, decades to unlearn it. The cultural layer: different cultures amplify this conditioning in different ways. Some prize obedience, others independence, others achievement. But the common thread is that the child's body signals are rarely prioritized. Think of how often we hear phrases like, "Stop crying, you're fine," "Don't answer back," "Good boys get angry," "Good girls always smile." Each one teaches the nervous system to override its truth. Each one suppresses authenticity in the name of conformity. Philosophical perspective philosophers have long asked, is human nature shaped or innate? Aristotle wrote of habituation shaping virtue. Rousseau saw childhood as corrupted by civilization. Foucault described schools, prisons, and hospitals as disciplinary systems molding bodies into compliant subjects. Neuroscience now shows what they intuited. Early conditioning isn't just moral, it's physiological. It wires the body's alarms, shapes how we breathe, and primes how we react to touch, tone, and presence. Why this matters for trauma when panic strikes in adulthood, it isn't random. It's not just the past of one event. It's the accumulated weight of childhood conditioning. The panic in group worship isn't only about the preacher's voice. It's about the echoes of every teacher's scold, every parent's shout, every cultural script that demanded silence. The freeze in an abusive relationship isn't only about the partner. It's about the nervous system trained from childhood to collapse under authority. The body isn't betraying us. It's repeating what it was taught. Reflection prompt, think back to childhood. What behaviors were praised? Which were punished? How did adults respond when you cried, shouted, froze, or stormed off? What did you learn, not just in words, but in your body, about what was safe and unsafe? Write it down. Notice how those patterns still echo in your life today. Childhood conditioning is the soil in which trauma grows, and neurodivergence shows us how sensitive that soil is, how easily it can be imprinted, how costly it is when authenticity is suppressed. The past won't stay past because it was never allowed to be fully present. The body never got to feel safe enough to complete the loop. So it carries it forward, waiting. And that waiting shows up in panic, shutdown, freeze, not because we are broken, but because our nervous systems were shaped by a world that asked for suppression instead of compassion. Emotional flashbacks, when memory returns as feeling, not all memories arrive as images. Not every trauma comes back as a vivid scene you can describe. Sometimes memory returns as a wave of feeling, raw, unshaped, without words or pictures. This is what we call an emotional flashback. Unlike a visual flashback, where you see the moment replay in your mind's eye, an emotional flashback is different. It drops you into the same body state you once lived without context. You suddenly feel despair, dread, rage, shame, panic, and you can't explain why. It feels irrational. It feels like overreacting. But it isn't. It's the body remembering in its own language. The physiology of emotional flashbacks. Let's break it down step by step. 1. The trigger, it might be tiny. A phrase, a glance, the smell of someone's cologne, the slam of a door. Often, you don't even notice the trigger consciously. It bypasses awareness, slipping straight into the body. 2. The amygdala fires. The amygdala detects threat. Because trauma rewires it, it doesn't distinguish between the past and now. It sounds the alarm as if you were back in the original danger. 3. The hippocampus fails to anchor normally. The hippocampus contextualizes, that was then, this is now. But in trauma, the memory never got properly filed. So the hippocampus goes quiet. There is no timestamp, no narrative. 4. The body floods cortisol and adrenaline surge. Heart races, breath shortens, stomach clenches. Muscles are primed for fight, flight, or freeze. 5. The feeling surfaces. What comes up isn't an image. It's effect, pure shame, pure fear, pure grief. The emotion feels out of proportion to the present context because it doesn't belong to the present. It belongs to the past. Why they feel so disorienting. The hardest part about emotional flashbacks is the lack of story. With a visual flashback, you might say, I keep seeing that night again. But with an emotional flashback, you can't name it. All you know is that you feel terrible. This makes them easy to misinterpret. You might think you're depressed. You might think you're irrationally angry. You might think you're broken. But what's really happening is that your body has time traveled. You are in the emotional climate of a past event without the memory attached. Pete Walker and complex PTSD therapist Pete Walker popularized the term emotional flashback in his work on complex PTSD, CPSD. Unlike single-event PTSD, which often involves vivid replays, CPSD develops from prolonged exposure to relational trauma, neglect, abuse, gaslighting, and chronic invalidation. Walker notes that survivors of CPTSD often sink suddenly into childlike states of fear or despair. They may collapse into shame, feel unworthy, panic in relationships, or rage at small triggers. These are not mood swings. They are emotional flashbacks, the nervous system reliving the emotional atmosphere of childhood. Scenario: sudden despair in conversation. Imagine this. You're sitting with a friend talking about something mundane, the weather, your plans, a TV show. Nothing threatening. Then they say something, maybe they raise an eyebrow, or respond with a clipped tone. It's small, hardly noticeable. But suddenly, your chest drops, a wave of despair hits, your throat tightens, your eyes sting. You feel like you've done something terribly wrong, like you're about to be abandoned, like you are small and helpless. Your friend keeps talking, unaware. To them, nothing has happened, but inside you, a storm has broken loose. That is an emotional flashback. It's not about the eyebrow. It's about every moment in childhood when a parent's disappointment meant withdrawal of love. It's about the shame etched into your nervous system that rises now, unbidden, unanchored. Scenario, rage out of nowhere, another example. You're in a relationship. Your partner forgets to call you back one evening. On the surface, it's minor. People forget. But when they finally text, you explode. Anger floods in. You accuse them of betrayal, neglect, and disloyalty. Later, you look back and feel confused, even ashamed. Why did I overreact? Why did I get so angry? But again, this isn't just about the missed call. It's about the body remembering every time as a child you felt abandoned, invisible, and unimportant. The amygdala fires, the hippocampus fails to contextualize, and the anger of years past erupts into the present. Personal echoes, I know this intimately. As a child, my meltdowns weren't just about the day's frustration. They were built from layers of unmet needs, invalidation, and suppression. The anger seemed disproportionate to the moment, but it was perfectly proportionate to the history behind it. As an adult, I felt waves of dread hitting conversations, despair that didn't match the situation, and anger that seemed to come from nowhere. For years, I thought this meant I was broken, that I was too much, too reactive, too unstable. But learning about emotional flashbacks reframed everything. These weren't overreactions, they were echoes. They were my body replaying feelings too overwhelming to process at the time, now breaking through without images, without words. Why words fail trauma lives in the body, because in the moment of overwhelm, the prefrontal cortex, the thinking language part of the brain, goes offline. Survival is prioritized, speech is deprioritized. That's why survivors often say, I don't have the words, because the memory was encoded without words. When it resurfaces the same way as feeling without narrative. This is why traditional talk therapy sometimes fails. Asking what happened can't always be answered. The body knows, but it doesn't speak in sentences. It speaks in sensations, emotions, impulses. The layer of shame emotional flashbacks don't just bring back the original feeling. They also bring shame about having the feeling. You cry in a meeting and feel weak. You rage at your partner and feel guilty. You collapse in despair and feel broken. Society rarely understands emotional flashbacks. Instead of compassion, you get judgment. Instead of support, you get told to calm down or stop overreacting. This compounds the trauma. The body isn't just reliving the past, it's punished again in the present. Philosophical and cultural perspectives, philosophy offers lenses here. Nietzsche spoke of eternal recurrence, the sense that we live the same patterns over and over. Emotional flashbacks are exactly that, recurrence of feeling without resolution. Heidegger described mood as the ground of existence. Emotional flashbacks reveal how deeply mood can seize us, shaping reality itself. Buddhism teaches that samskaras, impressions, remain in the body-mind, resurfacing until transformed. Emotional flashbacks are samskaras in action. Culturally, some traditions recognize this more than others. Indigenous healing practices often honor the body's wisdom, using ritual, dance, and song to process memories stored somatically. Western culture, by contrast, tends to dismiss feelings without context, leaving survivors isolated, breaking the loop. So how do we work with emotional flashbacks? 1. Name it. The first step is recognizing this is an emotional flashback. Naming it reduces shame and gives context. 2. Ground the body, slow breathing, feet on the floor, orienting to the present environment. Remind the body, this is now, not then. 3. Soothe. Don't argue, don't try to logic your way out. Logic doesn't reach the amygdala. Offer safety through soothing, touch, rhythm, warmth, gentle movement. 4. Track the pattern. Journaling helps. Record the feelings, the triggers, the contexts. Over time, patterns emerge. You begin to see how the past bleeds into the present. 5. Compassion, not condemnation. Instead of asking, why am I like this? Ask, what is my body remembering? Personal reflection, finding peace in recognition. For me, recognizing emotional flashbacks has been life-changing. It reframed despair not as weakness, but as memory. It reframed rage not as volatility, but as a protest that was silenced too young. It reframed panic not as madness, but as survival replaying itself. Even more, it gave me a way to respond. Instead of shaming myself, I learned to breathe, ground, journal, and track. I learned to say, this is a feeling from then, not about now. And each time I do, the grip loosens. The loop softens, the past begins to stay past. Key point emotional flashbacks are the nervous system's way of saying, something unresolved lives here. They're not random, not irrational, not proof of being broken. They're proof that the body remembers. And when we learn to recognize them, name them, and respond with compassion, we begin the slow work of giving the past what it never had, an ending. Scenario: freezing in an abusive relationship echoing childhood helplessness. We've explored panic in worship halls and the quiet violence of emotional flashbacks. But there's another form trauma takes, one that often hides in plain sight. The freeze. To understand it, let's step into a scenario. The scenario, a relationship turns cold. Imagine this. You're in a relationship. At first, it was warm, attentive, magnetic, the kind of connection that feels destined, that pulls you in like gravity. You felt seen, desired, chosen. But then it shifts. The warmth becomes inconsistent. Words become sharper, colder, promises unravel. Accusations creep in, and when you try to speak, to explain, to defend yourself, you freeze. Your throat closes, the words jam. Your body goes still, heavy, immobile. You hear yourself say nothing, or you hear yourself apologizing for things you didn't do. And inside, you feel small, trapped, helpless. The present moment is unbearable, but it is not only about the present. It's the body echoing something older. Step-by-step breakdown, the freeze response. 1. The threat detected: a raised voice, a contemptuous look, a dismissive hand gesture. The amygdala flares. Danger. 2. The fight-flight blocked. You could argue back. You could leave, but the stakes feel too high. Attachment, dependency, fear of abandonment, they all rise. The nervous system calculates. Fighting risks escalation, fleeing risks rejection. 3. The freeze engages. With no viable path to fight or flee, the body shuts down. The dorsal vagal branch of the vagus nerve slows heart rate, lowers energy, and numbs sensation. Muscles lock, throat tightens. Speech falters. 4. The helplessness floods, cortisol surges, then crashes. You feel detached, foggy, as if underwater. The abuser's words echo louder, not because they're true, but because your defenses have gone offline. 5. The aftermath: hours later, the freeze lifts. You think of all the things you could have said, all the exits you didn't take, all the defenses you couldn't muster. Shame arrives. Why didn't I do more? Why didn't I stand up for myself? But it wasn't weakness, it was survival. The body did what it had been trained to do long ago. Childhood echoes, the roots of freeze. This freeze in adulthood isn't random. It's the nervous system replaying childhood helplessness. The child was scolded for answering back. The child was punished for crying too loudly. The child who learned that stillness and silence meant safety. As I wrote in My Inner Child Was Broken, my meltdowns weren't just explosions. They were the aftermath of countless moments of suppression. The times I couldn't speak, couldn't act, couldn't make sense of what I was feeling. And each shutdown carved a groove. Each time I froze, my body learned, this is how to survive. So in adulthood, when a partner raised their voice, my nervous system didn't consult reason. It replayed the script written decades earlier. Manipulation and freeze. The dark triad at work. Abusers know this, even if unconsciously. Narcissists, psychopaths, and sociopaths thrive on freezing their partners into silence. They triangulate, dropping names of others, sowing insecurity. They gaslight, denying reality, dismissing memory. They withhold affection, attention, and approval. They attack when you're vulnerable, then soften just enough to keep you hooked. Each tactic is designed to overwhelm, to paralyze, to make your nervous system doubt itself. I've seen this in my own relationships. The way I began recording conversations was to prove to myself I wasn't crazy. The way the gaslighting of even the gaslighting left me stunned, voiceless. The way triangulation with people I'd never met left me frozen in spirals of suspicion, unable to find ground. The freeze was not a weakness. It was my body trying to survive a battlefield where every move felt like a trap. Philosophical and cultural context: freeze has always been misunderstood. Western culture prizes fight and flight, the warrior, the rebel, the escapee. Freeze is seen as cowardice, as failure. But in evolutionary terms, freeze is as old as life itself. Animals play dead. Insects feign stillness. Humans dissociate. Philosophers, too, have wrestled with it. Sartre described the gaze of the other as paralyzing. Foucault wrote of disciplinary systems that immobilize bodies into docility. And in Buddhist thought, aversion, one of the three poisons, often manifests as shutting down. Culturally, silence is often demanded. Children should be seen and not heard. Don't rock the boat. Keep calm and carry on. Freeze becomes not only a survival response, but a moral expectation. Personal reflection: my own freezes. There were so many times I froze. In classrooms, when I knew the answer but didn't dare speak, fearing ridicule. At home, when I wanted to say this isn't fair, silence felt safer. In relationships, when accusations came thick and fast, and I could feel my throat close, my words evaporated. I can still remember the pain of being asked, "What's wrong?" Just say it. And I couldn't, not because I didn't know, but because I literally couldn't. The freeze had taken over, and the pressure of being pressed to speak only intensified the collapse. The worst part was not the silence itself, but the judgment afterwards. Others saw stubbornness, avoidance, and defiance. I knew it was something else, but I didn't have the words. It took decades and the aid of reflection, writing, and even AI to put words to what had once been pure sensation. And when I did, it wasn't just relief. It was vindication. I wasn't broken. My body was doing what it had always done to keep me safe. The cost of freeze protects, but it erodes authenticity. You don't say what you mean. Don't show who you are. It feeds shame. Afterwards, you berate yourself for being silent. It isolates. Others misinterpret your stillness as indifference or defiance. It prolongs harm. Abusers thrive when their targets cannot resist or flee. Freeze is survival, but it leaves scars. Breaking the freeze slowly. You can't force your way out of a freeze. It isn't a choice. It's an autonomic state. But you can learn to work with it. 1. Recognition, naming it helps. This is freeze. This is my body protecting me. 2. Gentle movements, small movements, fingers, toes, turning the head, signal to the nervous system that safety is possible. 3. Rhythm, rocking, tapping, humming. Rhythmic actions activate the vagus nerve, softening collapse. 4. Safe witnessing, sharing, freeze experiences with someone who doesn't judge, who can simply hold presence, breaks the shame loop. 5. Slow practice over time, the body learns alternatives. Fight or flight become possible again. Authentic words find their way back. A wider reflection, freeze in society, it's not just personal. Freeze operates collectively. Citizens are paralyzed under authoritarian rule. Employees are silenced in toxic workplaces. Communities numbed by constant media fear-mongering. As I've explored in the Inversiverse, systems of control thrive on dissociation, avoidance, and denial. They suppress compassion and empathy, keeping people locked in unconscious loops. The freeze is not just individual. It is systemic, and recognizing it is the first step to breaking free. Freezing in an abusive relationship is never just about that relationship. It's every moment of childhood helplessness carried forward. It's every script of silence, every punishment for speaking the truth, every demand for compliance. When the body freezes, it is not betraying you. It is saving you in the only way it knows. The tragedy is that it saves you by stealing your voice. But the story doesn't end there. Because once you name the freeze, once you track it, once you honor it as survival, you can begin the slow, patient work of reclaiming what was silenced. The body will not forget, but it can be taught to move again. Trauma loops and dissociation. We've seen how panic erupts in crowds, how emotional flashbacks flood the body, how freeze silences in abusive relationships. But what happens when these responses don't just arrive and leave, when they repeat, again and again, like grooves carved into the nervous system? That's what we mean by trauma loops, and closely tied to them is dissociation, the nervous system's escape hatch when the loop feels unbearable. Together, they form one of the deepest patterns of trauma. The body locked into cycles of reliving, retreating, and relapsing. The anatomy of a trauma loop. A trauma loop begins when the body fails to fully process an overwhelming event. 1. Trigger a sound, a smell, a look, anything reminiscent of the original danger. 2. Response, the amygdala fires. Cortisol surges. The body goes into fight, flight, or freeze. 3. Collapse. The immediate danger passes, but the nervous system doesn't reset. Cortisol lingers, muscles stay tense, breathe shallow. 4. Reinforcement. The survivor interprets the response as weakness, adding shame. Social reactions often pound it. Why are you overreacting? Calm down. The shame becomes part of the memory, making the next trigger even sharper. 5. Repeat, the loop plays again at the next reminder. Each time, it deepens the groove until the nervous system expects it, even anticipates it. This is why trauma feels inescapable. The body isn't just remembering, it's rehearsing. The role of dissociation. When the loop becomes too overwhelming, the body sometimes chooses a different path. Dissociation. The prefrontal cortex goes offline. The mind detaches from the body. Reality feels foggy, unreal, dreamlike. Emotions go numb. It's a survival mechanism. If you can't fight, flee, or freeze without breaking, dissociation offers escape. It says, if you can't leave the situation, leave yourself. I've lived this. There were times when the overload became so much that I would retreat inside myself, watching life from a distance. I would hear people speaking but feel a split-second delay, as if I weren't quite in the room. And though it protected me, it also left me feeling alienated from myself. Case study, the classroom loop. Imagine a child in school. They are scolded for not sitting still. The shame of being singled out locks into the nervous system. Next week, they hear the teacher's footsteps behind them and the body surges with dread. They freeze, try to comply. The teacher praises them for being good. Inside, the loop deepens. Movement equals punishment. Stillness equals approval. Years later, in adulthood, sitting in meetings triggers the same loop. They feel trapped, restless, and ashamed for fidgeting. They dissociate to survive the discomfort. The loop is no longer about the teacher. It's about the nervous system rehearsing a script written long ago. Case study, the relationship loop now. Picture an adult in a toxic relationship. The partner criticizes them harshly one night. The body freezes. Later, the partner soothes them with affection, creating a trauma bond. The next conflict triggers the same freeze, reinforced by shame and relief. Over time, the nervous system comes to expect cruelty paired with comfort, abuse tied to love. This loop makes leaving almost impossible. Each cycle convinces the body that pain and attachment belong together, and dissociation often steps in during the cruelty, numbing the experience just enough to survive, but at the cost of authenticity. Philosophical and cultural context trauma loops echo what philosophers and mystics have observed about human life for centuries. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence describes the unbearable weight of reliving the same patterns endlessly. Trauma loops are a biological recurrence not chosen but imposed. Freud's repetition compulsion framed trauma as the psyche's attempt to master what was once overwhelming. Survivors return unconsciously to the scene of pain, hoping this time it will end differently. Buddhism's samsara speaks of cycles of suffering that repeat until awareness transforms them. Trauma loops are samsara in the nervous system. Culturally, trauma loops aren't only individual. Generations replay them. Families repeat patterns of neglect, abuse, and silence. Nations replay cycles of war, oppression, and scapegoating. The loop can be inherited as much as lived. Dissociation in practice. What does dissociation feel like? Survivors describe feeling like they're floating above their body, hearing their own voice from a distance, losing chunks of time, numbness, not sadness or anger, just blankness, a sense of unreality, like the world has lost its color. I've known this too. In moments of overwhelm, when the noise of life stacked too high, I would go silent inside. The external world blurred while my body remained on autopilot. Others saw calm. Inside I was gone. The cost of dissociation, like freeze, dissociation protects. But it also costs. It fragments identity. You feel cut off from parts of yourself. It distorts memory. Events blur, leaving gaps that shame fills. It undermines connection. Relationships suffer when you can't be fully present. It delays healing. If the body can't feel, it can't process. And yet, without it, many survivors wouldn't have made it. Dissociation is the paradox, salvation that isolates, protection that wounds. Personal reflection, my loops looking back, I can see the loops. The loop of anger and shame, meltdown, punishment, suppression, repeat. The loop of compliance, masking, praise, exhaustion, collapse. The loop of toxic relationships, charm, abuse, freeze, reconciliation. Each loop felt endless. Each one convinced me I was the problem. And dissociation, it was my exit door. When the loop grew too much, I disappeared inside. People saw silence, withdrawal, even stubbornness. But really, it was my nervous system's last defense. Only years later, through reflection and writing, did I begin to see the pattern. Naming the loop loosened its grip. Naming dissociation made it less shameful, more understandable. Breaking the loops. So how do we interrupt trauma loops and soften dissociation? Slowly, gently, with patience. 1. Awareness, track the pattern. Notice when the loop begins, what triggers it, and what follows. 2. Grounding, use present cues, touch, breath, movement to remind the body this is now, not then. 3. Compassion, replace shame with recognition. This is survival, not weakness. 4. Connection, safe relationships help. Being witnessed without judgment dissolves isolation. 5. Integration over time, fragments reconnect. Dissociated parts return, the loop loosens. The collective loop society itself lives in trauma loops. The media triggers fear. People react with anger, panic, and withdrawal. Leaders shame or dismiss the reaction. The cycle repeats. As I've argued in the Inversiverse, control systems thrive on these loops. They condition fear, reward compliance, and punish dissent. And dissociation, through entertainment, distraction, and consumerism, becomes the cultural norm. Breaking collective loops requires the same steps as personal ones: awareness, grounding, compassion, and connection. Trauma loops and dissociation show us why the past won't stay past. Because the body doesn't just remember. It rehearses, it repeats, it relieves. And dissociation, though protective, keeps us from completing the loop. It presses pause but never stops. The work of healing isn't about erasing the loops. It's about learning to recognize them, to soften them, to step out gently, slowly, compassionately. Because only then can the nervous system learn that the danger has passed. Only then can the past begin to stay past. Collective trauma and cultural memory. So far, we've been talking about the body as an individual archive, how panic, flashbacks, and freeze responses reveal the past replaying itself inside one nervous system. But trauma doesn't stop at the personal, it scales. Whole communities, nations, and cultures carry wounds. These wounds pass down generations, shaping how groups remember, how societies act, how history itself lives in bodies. This is the realm of collective trauma and cultural memory. What is collective trauma? Collective trauma refers to a psychological wound shared by a group of people, resulting from catastrophic events or prolonged oppression. Wars, genocides, slavery, colonization, pandemics, systemic racism. These don't just harm individuals, they reshape communities for decades, even centuries. The Holocaust, the Atlantic slave trade, partition in India, 9/11, the COVID-19 pandemic. These events are more than historical facts. They live in families, in rituals, in inherited fears, in silences. The transmission of trauma. How does trauma spread across generations? Researchers propose several mechanisms. 1. Psychological transmission. Children absorb their parents' unresolved grief, fear, and hypervigilance. Silence becomes as shaping as words. For example, Holocaust survivors often avoided telling their children stories. yet the children still grew up with an atmosphere of dread and fragility. 2. Behavioral transmission parenting styles shaped by trauma become new environments for children. A parent who learned mistrust after war may raise children to be hypervigilant, cautious, and anxious. 3. Biological transmission epigenetics suggests trauma may alter how genes are expressed. For instance, studies of descendants of Holocaust survivors found changes in cortisol regulation, echoing their parents' trauma. Skeptics caution against overinterpreting, but the findings keep resurfacing. 4. Cultural transmission stories, rituals, taboos, and political narratives encode trauma into identity. Collective memory becomes not just history, but part of belonging. Theories and proponents. Several modern thinkers have advanced our understanding of collective trauma. Vamik Volkan, a psychoanalyst, coined the term chosen trauma, the way groups hold on to past suffering as part of identity, sometimes reactivating it in conflict. Jeffrey Alexander, sociologist, proposed cultural trauma theory, arguing that trauma isn't just an event, but the meaning societies construct around it. Thomas Hubel, contemporary teacher, emphasizes collective trauma integration, rituals and dialogues that allow groups to process what individuals alone cannot. Bessel van der Kolk extends his work from The Body Keeps the Score to suggest that healing must include community-based practices, not only private therapy. Scenario: cultural memory in the body. Let's imagine a different kind of scenario. A second-generation refugee attends a concert. The crowd cheers, drums pound, lights flash. But instead of joy, their body feels dread. They can't place it, but their parents fled under searchlights, hid under bombardments. The child never lived it, but the nervous system reacts as if the memory belongs to them too. This is cultural memory embodied. Trauma not personally experienced, but transmitted. Skeptical voices, not everyone agrees. Some critics argue collective trauma risks being metaphorical rather than scientific. They caution, trauma is an individual nervous system process. Speaking of group trauma may anthropomorphize cultures. Epigenetic findings are intriguing but contested. Changes in stress hormones may result from parenting styles, not genetic inheritance. The language of collective trauma, they say, risks being weaponized politically, groups competing over victimhood, rewriting history for power. These critiques are worth hearing. They remind us not to romanticize trauma, not to turn it into an identity badge. But even skeptics acknowledge that historical wounds leave deep social and psychological imprints, even if the precise mechanisms remain debated. Modern applications, despite the debates, the concept of collective trauma is increasingly used in conflict resolution, acknowledging historical wounds in peace processes, therapy, group-based healing for descendants of oppressed communities, politics, truth and reconciliation commissions in South Africa, Canada, and beyond, activism, movements recognizing generational wounds of racism, colonization, and patriarchy. The language of trauma gives shape to pain that might otherwise remain invisible. Personal echoes, feeling the collective. I felt this in my own life. Not just my personal meltdowns and freezes, but the way collective events triggered my nervous system. During the pandemic, I felt not only my own fear but a collective anxiety humming through society. Protests, riots, political betrayals, my body responded as if tapped into a wider nervous system. And perhaps it was. Mirror neurons don't just resonate in a family. They resonate across societies. A crowd panics and you feel it. A nation grieves and you carry it. This isn't mystical. It's human biology extended into culture. But it feels mystical because the body doesn't separate me from we as clearly as our minds do. Philosophical reflections, philosophers remind us that memory is never purely individual. Hal Box, an early sociologist, coined the idea of collective memory, that individuals remember within frameworks given by social groups. Foucault described power as embedded in bodies, rituals, and discourses, shaping not only what we do, but how we remember. Arendt, writing on totalitarianism, warned how political systems manipulate collective memory, erasing some traumas while exaggerating others. If trauma is remembered socially, then healing must also be social. The danger of loops at scale. Just as individuals get trapped in trauma loops, so do societies. A nation traumatized by war becomes hypervigilant, aggressive, and quick to see enemies. Communities wounded by colonization may internalize shame, division, and mistrust. Political leaders exploit chosen trauma, invoking old wounds to mobilize fear and loyalty. We see this today in rhetoric about borders, identity, and nationalism. Collective wounds are reopened, sometimes intentionally, to keep societies in cycles of fear, breaking the collective loop. So what does healing look like? 1. Recognition, naming the wound. Acknowledging histories denied or silenced. 2. Witnessing, storytelling, testimony, truth commissions, making hidden pain visible. 4. Dialogue groups in conflict meetings, hearing each other's wounds. 5. Integration. 3. Ritual collective acts of mourning, remembrance, and forgiveness. Music, art, and memorials as ways the body of society processes. Not erasing the trauma, but weaving it into identity in a way that no longer controls behavior. Personal reflection, hope in the collective. When I look at society now, I see both despair and possibility. Yes, systems of control keep us dissociated, numbed, looping in fear. Yes, media and politics exploit wounds rather than heal them. But I also see movements of compassion, small communities reclaiming empathy, people daring to remember together. For me, recognizing collective trauma reframed my own struggles. I wasn't only carrying my past, I was carrying echoes of a culture that taught suppression, denial, and fear. Seeing that freed me from some shame. My reactions weren't just mine. They were human, part of a larger pattern. And if that's true, then healing too is collective. We don't heal alone. We heal in dialogue, in community, in shared rituals that remind us the past does not need to stay present forever. Collective trauma and cultural memory show us why the past won't stay past, not only for individuals, but for entire societies. The challenge is real: to honor wounds without becoming imprisoned by them, to acknowledge pain without exploiting it, to integrate memory without weaponizing it. And perhaps that's the work before us now. To listen, not only to our own bodies, but to the body of society. To ask again and again, what is still unprocessed? What loops are we replaying? And how do we finally let the past become past, not forgotten, but transformed? Practices for reclaiming the present body. We've explored how trauma repeats in panic, in flashbacks, in freeze, in dissociation, in cultural memory. But knowing the theory isn't enough. The body doesn't shift through ideas alone. It needs practice, rhythm, and ritual. This part is about reclaiming presence, step by step, practice by practice. Not quick fixes, not miracle cures, but small acts that remind the body. This is now. You are here. You are safe enough to stay. Why practices matter. Trauma traps us in loops because it convinces the body that danger never ended. Thoughts alone can't persuade the amygdala. Words don't soothe the vagus nerve. The nervous system doesn't speak English. It speaks sensation, rhythm, and experience. That's why practices matter. They translate safety into the body's own language. They give the nervous system evidence, not just ideas. Practice 1. Tracking body signals. Start with noticing. Each day pause and ask, what is my body telling me right now? Is my jaw tight? Is my breath shallow or deep? Do I feel heavy, light, restless, or still? You don't need to fix anything. The practice is simply to track, to build a map of your body's language. Over time, you'll see patterns. You'll notice how certain people, places, or tasks tighten your chest or soften your shoulders. This is your nervous system giving feedback in real time. Practice 2. Journaling without censorship. Right, but not for an audience. Journaling helps externalize the loops. When an emotional flashback floods you with shame or despair, put pen to paper. Don't worry about coherence. Just let the words tumble. Later, read them back gently. You may see echoes of childhood voices, traces of old patterns. You may see that the shame you feel today doesn't belong only to today. This creates distance. It gives form to what felt formless. Practice 3. Orienting to the present. When triggered, the body collapses into then. Orienting is a way to remind it of now. Look around the room. Name 5 things you see. Notice 3 colors. Listen for 3 sounds. Feel your feet on the floor. It's simple, almost childlike. But it works because it anchors the nervous system in sensory reality. It whispers, this is 2025, not 1995. This is a safe room, not a classroom or abusive home. Practice 4. Breath and rhythm. Trauma disrupts breath. Panic shortens it. Freeze flattens it. Dissociation detaches from it. Reclaiming breath doesn't mean forcing calm. It means reintroducing rhythm. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 2. Exhale for 6, repeat gently. Or hum. Humming stimulates the vagus nerve, soothing the system. Rocking, drumming, walking in rhythm. All these reintroduce a predictable pattern where chaos once ruled. Practice 5. Safe witnessing. Shame thrives in silence. One of the most powerful ways to break trauma loops is to be witnessed without judgment. This doesn't have to be therapy, though therapy helps. It could be a trusted friend, a support group, or even sharing in writing where others respond with compassion. The act of being seen dissolves the lie trauma tells. You are alone. You are broken. You are beyond help. When another nervous system stays steady in the face of your storm, your own begins to learn safety. Practice 6. Boundaries and exit points. Sometimes the most powerful practice is leaving. If your body tightens around a person or place, listen. That tension might be an exit point, a signal that safety lies not in staying calm, but in stepping away. Journal those moments. Track when safety feels like suppression. Practice small exits first. Say no to a demand. Leave a room for a minute, then expand outward. Each time you listen, your nervous system learns to trust itself again. Practice 7. Compassionate self-talk. Most of us inherited harsh inner voices. Why are you overreacting? You're too much. Get over it. These phrases replay the shaming of childhood. A practice is to consciously replace them. When panic rises, when shame floods in, say, this is my body remembering. I survived. I'm safe enough now. It makes sense that I feel this way. It might feel awkward at first, but over time, the body begins to hear a new script, one of compassion instead of condemnation. Practice 8. Embodied rituals healing isn't only clinical, it's cultural, spiritual, ritualistic. Light a candle when journaling, marking the act as sacred. Move your body to music that mirrors your state, rage, grief, joy, until you feel release. Create personal ceremonies of remembrance, acknowledging the child you were, the pain endured, the survival achieved. Rituals give form to the formless. They give the nervous system closure it never had. Personal reflection. My own practices, I've lived long in loops, meltdowns, freezes, dissociations. For years, I thought I was broken. But slowly, I found practices that worked for me. Journaling became a lifeline, not polished writing, just raw words that made the storm visible. Breath became a tether. I remember nights lying awake, chest pounding, and simply counting breaths until my body softened. Exit points became liberation. I learned to trust the churn in my gut, the heaviness in my chest, as signals to leave groups, relationships, systems that drained me. And ritual gave me peace, lighting a candle to write, sitting in stillness at dusk, creating small ceremonies to honor what had once been unspoken. These practices didn't erase the trauma, but they gave me ground. They gave my body reminders that it wasn't trapped in the past forever. Skeptical notes. It's worth noting, not every practice works for everyone. Some trauma survivors find mindfulness triggering, sitting still reminds them of freeze. Others find journaling overwhelming, words flood in too fast. Critics of trauma-focused practices argue that they risk creating identity loops, people defining themselves by trauma endlessly. The counterpoint: practices aren't about glorifying trauma, they're about creating flexibility. They're about giving the nervous system more options than fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. They're about slowly reclaiming presence. The larger picture practices for the body are not just self-help tools. They're acts of resistance in a world that profits from dissociation. A culture of constant distraction, performance, and consumption thrives when we remain cut off from our bodies. Every time you breathe deeply, every time you journal, every time you listen to your gut and walk away, you disrupt those systems. You refuse to remain in unconscious loops. In that sense, reclaiming the present body is not only personal healing, it is cultural defiance, reclaiming the self. We began this episode with panic in a worship hall. We walked through childhood conditioning, emotional flashbacks, abusive freezes, trauma loops, and cultural wounds. And we end here with practices, not grand theories, but small acts that remind the body it belongs to the present. The past may not stay past on its own, but with patience, awareness, and compassion, we can help the body complete what was once impossible. And that takes us to the next chapter. Because if the body relives the past, if trauma loops rehearse memory endlessly, then we need to ask, how exactly does the body act like a time machine? That's where we're headed next. Episode 12, Trauma Loops and the Body's Time Machine. We'll dive into how memory isn't just stored in the brain, but in the body, how sensations fold time, how flashbacks bend chronology, and why healing means teaching the body that now is not then. Until next time, take care of yourselves, listen gently to your body, and remember, healing is not linear, but every step matters. This has been The Body Knows. I'm James Miller.